The night was just after 1 in the morning, May 14th, 1983. Two law enforcement officers patrolling Southern California's San Diego freeway noticed something unusual, a brown Toyota Celica weaving erratically across lanes. What started as a routine traffic stop would become the capture of one of America's most prolific serial killers. When Officer Sterling and Sergeant Howard approached the vehicle, they encountered a man standing beside his car, beer spilling onto the pavement, his clothing disheveled. He seemed compliant enough, agreeing to field sobriety tests that he promptly failed. But as Sergeant Howard peered into the passenger seat, he discovered something that would change everything. A young man, motionless, clearly deceased. This single arrest would unravel a decade-long killing spree that had terrorized California. The driver's name was Randy Kraft, and investigators would soon discover he had compiled a cryptic list documenting over 60 victims who had suffered unimaginable horrors at his hands. Randy Stephen Kraft entered the world on March 19, 1945, in the coastal city of Long Beach, California. He was the youngest child and only son born to Opal Lee and Harold Herbert Kraft. His father had relocated from Wyoming to California shortly after Pearl Harbor, finding work as a production worker at Douglas Aircraft Company. Eventually, his wife and 3 daughters joined him on the West Coast. The Kraft household lived a modest working-class existence. Harold worked the assembly line while Opal juggled multiple jobs to keep the family afloat financially. She started as a seamstress in a Westminster garment factory, then transitioned to working as a school cook. Despite her demanding work schedule, she remained devoted to her 4 children, always making time for their needs. In 1948, the family settled in Westminster, located in Orange County. Young Randy attended Midway City Elementary School, where Opal was active in the Parent-Teacher Association. From an early age, Randy displayed notable intelligence. His teachers and classmates recognized his sharp mind and academic potential. By 1957, Randy's intellectual abilities had earned him a place in accelerated programs at 17th Street Junior High School. He graduated high school in 1963 and enrolled at Claremont Men's College in the small academic community of Claremont, California. College life suited Randy initially. He joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps, showing interest in military service. He became politically engaged, and in 1964, he actively supported Barry Goldwater's Republican presidential campaign. He also publicly backed American involvement in the Vietnam War. To support himself financially, he worked at a local gay bar while managing his demanding course load. The pressure began taking its toll. Randy started using Valium to manage stress-related stomach problems and headaches. His friends grew concerned as his medication use increased. His academic performance declined. He began drinking heavily, played poker through the night, and eventually failed an econometrics course, delaying his graduation by 8 months. The year 1968 marked a turning point in Randy's life. He finally completed his economics degree and underwent a dramatic political transformation, shifting from conservative Republican views to progressive Democratic ideals. He threw himself into campaigning for Robert Kennedy with the same intensity he'd previously shown for Goldwater. That same year, Randy enlisted in the United States Air Force. His entrance examinations revealed exceptional intelligence. He scored 129 on the IQ test, placing him well above average. The military assigned him to Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County, California, a high-security installation where his intellect could be put to use. But Randy's military career came to an abrupt end in 1969. He made the difficult decision to come out to his family and friends as gay. While his loved ones accepted him, the military had a very different response. Under the discriminatory policies of the era, Randy was forced out of service. This rejection left him feeling lost and directionless. Returning to civilian life, Randy took whatever work he could find. He went back to bartending, then became a long-haul truck driver based in Huntington Beach. Seeking to rebuild his life, he also began teaching economics courses at California State University, Long Beach. It was there that he met Jeff Graves, a younger man from Minnesota. They began a relationship, and for a time, it seemed Randy might finally find stability and happiness. But beneath this seemingly normal exterior, something dark was festering. March 1970 brought Randy's first known criminal act. While wandering the streets of Huntington Beach, he encountered 13-year-old Joseph Alvin Fancher, a runaway desperately seeking shelter. Randy offered the boy a place to stay, an act that appeared charitable but concealed sinister intentions. After bringing Joseph to his apartment, Randy drugged the teenager and violently assaulted him. Fortunately, Joseph managed to escape while Randy was at work. A passerby noticed the boy's distressed condition and immediately called for help. At the hospital, Joseph told police about being drugged and beaten by Randy. However, he didn't disclose the full extent of the abuse. When officers went to Randy's apartment, they made a critical error. They entered without a warrant. Fearing legal repercussions and potential job loss over this procedural mistake, they decided not to file charges. This decision would prove catastrophic, allowing Randy to continue his predatory behavior unchecked. By late 1971, the first murder victim was discovered. Highway workers found a severely decomposed body along Ortega Highway. The victim was identified as Wayne Joseph Duquette, a 30-year-old bartender. The autopsy determined he'd died from alcohol poisoning on September 20th of that year. With no physical evidence, witnesses, or leads, the investigation quickly stalled. On December 26, 1972, California Highway Patrol officers made a grim discovery on Highway 405 in Seal Beach. The body of 20-year-old Navy sailor Edward Daniel Moore lay on the roadside. He'd been bound at the wrists and ankles, bore impact marks on his face from a blunt weapon, and showed bite marks across his body. Most disturbingly, a sock had been forced into his rectum. The positioning of the body suggested he'd been thrown from a moving vehicle. Just 6 weeks later, on February 6th, another body turned up near the Terminal Island Freeway. This victim, a male between 17 and 25 years old, couldn't be identified. Like Edward Moore, he had a sock inserted in the same manner. Investigators began connecting the dots. These murders bore identical signatures, suggesting a single perpetrator was responsible. April 9, 1973 brought another horrific discovery. 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey was found beside a road in Huntington Beach. He had been castrated and sodomized. Just 13 days later, another dismembered body was discovered and labeled as John Doe by investigators who couldn't establish his identity. On July 30th, 20-year-old Ronnie Jean Weba was found strangled. The marks on his body indicated he'd been restrained and suspended before death finally came. The year concluded with yet another gruesome finding on December 29th. 23-year-old art student Vincent Cruz Mestas was discovered deceased in the San Bernardino Mountains. Vincent was openly bisexual, fitting the emerging victim profile. Following the killer's signature pattern, one of Vincent's own socks had been forced into his rectum. His hands had been severed and were never recovered. By November 1974, 5 additional victims had been located beside or near major Southern California highways. 3 of these cases were definitively linked to the same perpetrator. 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little and 19-year-old James Dale Reeves were both found beside freeways with foreign objects inserted into their bodies. The third victim, 18-year-old Marine Roger Edward Dickerson, displayed bite marks consistent with several earlier. Victims, January 3, 1975, saw Randy abduct and murder 17-year-old high school student John Leiras. The teenager was last observed boarding a bus in Long Beach. His strangled body was discovered the next day, discarded at Sunset Beach with a foreign object protruding from his body. Drag marks in the sand near where his body lay suggested 2 people had carried John's remains toward the water. 2 weeks after this killing, on January 17th, the body of 21-year-old Craig Jodas was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Golden Sails Hotel near Pacific Coast Highway and Linden Drive in Long Beach. Craig had been strangled to death with a length of cord. possibly a shoelace. By early 1975, investigators had linked 14 victims discovered across 4 separate counties over 3 years to a single killer. All victims were Caucasian males, sharing similar physical characteristics. A pattern was emerging, but the killer remained frustratingly elusive. March 29, 1975, would prove particularly tragic. Keith Crotwell and his friend Kent May left home to hitchhike southward, completely unaware of the danger ahead. Randy lured both young men from a Long Beach parking lot into his Ford Mustang. He plied them with beer and Valium, while driving aimlessly around Belmont Shore and Seal Beach. When the two failed to return home, police launched an immediate search. They soon received a crucial tip from 2 young witnesses who reported seeing Crotwell and May in a black and white Mustang. They watched as the vehicle sped into a parking lot, where the driver suddenly leaned across, opened the passenger door, and shoved May out onto the pavement. May appeared severely intoxicated or drugged. The witnesses saw Crotwell slumped against the driver's shoulder before the Mustang disappeared into the night. A month later, Crotwell's severed head was discovered at a pier near Long Beach Harbor. Police worked frantically to identify the driver, eventually obtaining a name, Randy Kraft. On May 19th, detectives brought Randy in for questioning. He admitted picking up Crotwell, but claimed he'd dropped him at a cafe and knew nothing more about his disappearance. Randy also stated his car had been in an accident afterward, requiring a tow truck. His partner Jeff Graves corroborated every detail of his alibi. The detectives didn't believe Randy's story, but they faced a serious problem. The Los Angeles County prosecutors refused to file charges due to insufficient evidence. Without the rest of Crotwell's body and unable to determine the exact cause of death, their hands were tied. Randy walked free once again. After lying low for several months, Randy's crimes escalated dramatically. On December 31st, he kidnapped 22-year-old Mark Hall. What followed was beyond comprehension. Randy tied Mark to a tree in a remote canyon and subjected him to unimaginable torture. Randy's torture of Mark Hall was extraordinarily brutal. He sexually assaulted him, then castrated him, and stuffed his severed genitals into his rectum. He burned Mark with a lighter on his chest, nose, and cheeks. He gouged out his eyes, then attacked him with a broken bottle. As if these horrors weren't enough, Randy finally killed Mark by suffocating him, stuffing leaves and dirt down his throat until he couldn't breathe. When police discovered Mark's body, even seasoned investigators were shocked by the level of cruelty. The autopsy revealed something even more disturbing. Mark had been alive and conscious through most of this torture. This led investigators to create a profile of the killer, highly intelligent, methodical, organized, and possibly with military training. They noted that surgical tape had been used on several victims' noses, a technique employed by military personnel to slow body decomposition. On January 24, 1976, law enforcement officials from across Southern California convened in Orange County to coordinate their investigation. Meanwhile, Randy was living what appeared to be a peaceful, ordinary life. In the following months, he ended his relationship with Jeff Graves and quickly found a new partner, Jeff Seelig. A 19-year-old baker's apprentice, Randy and Jeff moved to Laguna Hills together, exchanged promises of lifelong commitment, and shared an interest in threesomes. They frequently picked up hitchhikers from highways for these encounters. During this period, Randy's violent urges seemed to subside. His relationship appeared to satisfy whatever darkness drove him. He went nearly a full year without committing any murders until December 10, 1976, when he killed 19-year-old Paul Joseph Fuchs. Though Fuchs's body was never located, his name would later appear on Randy's victim list. Randy remained dormant after that killing, but on April 16, 1978, he struck again. He drugged Scott Michael Hughes with Valium, strangled him, and removed one of his testicles. Scott's body was found fully clothed except for his missing shoelaces. On June 11th, 23-year-old Roland Gerald Young was discovered near a San Diego highway, mutilated and stabbed multiple times before being thrown from a speeding vehicle. 8 days later, Marine Richard Allen Keith's body was found on Moulton Parkway. Evidence showed he'd been restrained, and strangulation was the cause of death. Toxicology revealed alcohol in his system. Despite continuous investigative efforts, police couldn't identify the killer or prevent more deaths. Keith Arthur King, a 23-year-old, was found beside Interstate 5, strangled with his own shoelaces. At the hospital, doctors discovered he'd consumed massive amounts of acetaminophen and alcohol. He had burn marks on his chest and died shortly after being found. On September 29th, 20-year-old Richard Anthony Crosby was discovered dead under similar circumstances along Highway 71 in San Bernardino. He'd vanished the previous day while hitchhiking. The media dubbed him the California Strangler, and fear gripped the entire region. Every law enforcement officer remained on high alert, knowing the next victim could be found at any moment. November 12, 1978 brought the discovery of trucker Michael Joseph Inderbeaton's body near the San Diego freeway. Like others before him, he'd been castrated. He'd also been violated with a foreign object and suffered burns identical to those inflicted on Mark Hall 2 years earlier. The official cause of death was listed as suffocation. Randy's attacks became less frequent over the next year. His next murder occurred in July 1979 on a highway where 20-year-old sailor Donnie Harold Creasel died from acute alcohol poisoning. His body showed clear signs of being bound and tortured. 2 months later, in September, parts of 21-year-old British tourist Keith Anthony Jackson were found in trash bags behind a Union 76 gas station in Long Beach. A sock had been inserted into his rectum. Only Keith's head, torso, and left leg were ever recovered. 2 weeks later, on September 14th, the body of 19-year-old Gregory Wallace Jolly was discovered in Lake Arrowhead. Gregory had been emasculated, and his head and legs had been severed post-mortem. His personal belongings would later be found in Randy's home, providing crucial evidence. February 18, 1980, saw 19-year-old Mark Allen Marsh's body dumped near Templin Highway. He was last seen hitchhiking toward Buena Park. That summer, Randy's work as a truck driver took him to Oregon, where he stayed in Portland and claimed 2 more lives. Michael Sean O'Fallon, a recent college graduate hitchhiking across the country, became Randy's prey. Randy drugged and strangled him, dumping his body near Salem, where it was discovered the following day. Randy is also believed to have murdered an unidentified man, estimated to be between 35 and 45 years old, whose body was found beside a freeway in Woodburn. Randy forced this victim to swallow toxic levels of Valium and acetaminophen before strangling him with a cord. In September, Randy returned to California and resumed his killing spree. This time his victim was Robert Loggins, and Randy did something different. He took photographs. These incriminating images, later seized from Randy's possession, showed Loggins in Randy's living room, slumped on the sofa, appearing intoxicated and in various nude pornographic poses. In every single photograph, Loggins' eyes were closed. Investigators could never determine whether he was alive or already dead when these pictures were taken. On April 10, 1981, Randy kidnapped Michael Cluck while he was hitchhiking. What followed was brutally violent. Randy assaulted him sexually, then delivered 31 blows to his head, killing him. He dumped Michael's body near Interstate 5 in Oregon. 4 months later, the partially clothed body of male prostitute Christopher Allen Williams was discovered in the San Bernardino Mountains. He had ingested multiple drugs, and a paper towel stuffed in his nostrils caused him to suffocate on his own mucus. By early 1982, Randy's relationship with Jeff Seelig had deteriorated significantly. They fought frequently and experienced multiple temporary separations. In an attempt to save their relationship, the couple began attending weekly counseling sessions in Huntington Beach, starting on June 22, 1982. But the therapy did nothing to stop Randy's murderous impulses. In fact, the brutality of his killings escalated dramatically. 14-year-old Raymond Davis disappeared while searching for his dog in Echo Park. 12 days later, his decomposed body was found under leaves, his wrists bound, and a shoelace wrapped around his neck. Nearby, 16-year-old Robert Avila was found dead under strikingly similar circumstances. He'd been strangled to death with a length of stereo speaker wire. Randy didn't kill again until November 1st, 1982, when he abducted and murdered 24-year-old Modesto resident Ira Mickle Lane. Lane was last seen hitchhiking toward Orange County in search of employment. His body wasn't discovered until January 1984, discarded on a hillside near the town of Ramona. 4 weeks after Lane's murder, the semi-nude body of 26-year-old Brian Witcher was thrown from a moving vehicle alongside Interstate 5 freeway near Wilsonville, Oregon. Brian had consumed high levels of both alcohol and Valium, but he died from asphyxiation. On December 3, 1982, 29-year-old Anthony Jose Silvera vanished while hitchhiking. 2 weeks later, his body was found displaying the same signature signs as previous victims. After committing this murder, Randy left on a business trip, returning with Silvera's military jacket, a trophy from his kill. He was ready to claim more victims. Before returning to California, Randy stopped in Michigan, checking into the Grand Rapids Hotel. There he encountered Dennis Alt and Christopher Schoenborn. Randy drugged and sexually assaulted both men, then murdered Dennis through suffocation and strangled Christopher with a belt after inserting a pen into his urethra. Their bodies were discovered on December 9, 1982, in a field near the hotel. Randy left Schoenborn's keys and Silvera's jacket in his hotel room before fleeing. That same month in Portland, Randy killed 19-year-old Lance Tagg by overdosing him with drugs and suffocating him with a sock lodged in his windpipe. His body was found the next day discarded along a rural road in Clackamas County, close to where Witcher's body had been discovered just 2 weeks prior. 21-year-old Eric Church, last seen hitchhiking from Orange County to Sacramento, was found dead along Interstate 605. He'd suffered similar tortures to Dennis and Christopher, but showed signs of struggling desperately against his restraints. He died from strangulation and severe head trauma. On February 12, 1983, Randy killed 2 Buena Park men, 18-year-old Jeffrey Nelson and 20-year-old Roger Duvall. The 2 young men were last seen outside their friend Bryce Wilson's house shortly after midnight. They'd told Wilson they were going out to buy food. They would never return. Randy continued his heinous acts, completely unaware that his luck was about to run out in the most unexpected way. It was precisely 1:10 a.m. on May 14, 1983, when Officer Sterling and Sergeant Howard noticed a brown Toyota Celica swerving erratically across lanes on the San Diego freeway in Orange County. They initiated a traffic stop and approached the vehicle's driver, Randy Kraft, who casually tossed a beer bottle onto the pavement as they walked up. Officer Sterling immediately noticed Randy's pants were unbuttoned and unzipped, which struck him as highly unusual. He administered field sobriety tests, which Randy failed spectacularly. They placed him under arrest for driving under the influence. Meanwhile, Sergeant Howard approached the passenger side of the Celica. He observed a young man slumped in the seat with his eyes closed, partially covered by a jacket. Several empty Moosehead beer bottles and an open prescription bottle of lorazepam tablets were scattered around his feet. Howard attempted to wake the passenger, but received no response. He shook the man's arm, immediately noticing the body temperature was abnormally low. Checking for a pulse, Howard confirmed what he feared. The man was dead. A ligature mark was clearly visible around his neck. When Howard lifted the jacket from the victim's lap, he discovered the victim's jeans had been opened, exposing his genitalia. The victim's hands were bound with a shoelace, and his wrists showed welts from being restrained. The victim was later identified as Terry Lee Gambrell, a 25-year-old Marine stationed at El Toro Air Base. He'd been strangled to death. Searching the vehicle thoroughly, Howard uncovered a treasure trove of damning evidence: alcohol bottles, tranquilizers, various prescription medications, and an envelope containing over 47 disturbing photographs showing young men in explicit lifeless poses. There was also blood on the passenger seat that didn't belong to Gambrell. Since he had no open wounds, Howard had an immediate gut feeling they just captured the California Strangler. Randy was transported to the sheriff's department for processing. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his residence and made discoveries that confirmed their worst suspicions. They found clothing and personal belongings from numerous young men whose bodies had been discovered over the years along California highways. They also found more photographs of unconscious or deceased men, but the most shocking discovery was Randy's coded list, a cryptic record documenting 61 victims, including 4 double murders totaling 65 young men. Gambrell wasn't on this list because his death had led directly to Randy's arrest. After matching the list with bodies that had been discovered, investigators arrived at a total of 67 victims. It was clear Randy Kraft needed to face the ultimate penalty for his crimes. The California Strangler was formally charged with 15 murders committed between December 1972 and May 1983, after interviewing over 700 witnesses and presenting more than 250 pieces of evidence. The trial finally began on September 26, 1988. Randy pleaded not guilty to all charges. However, on November 29, 1989, he was convicted and sentenced to death, following California's moratorium on capital punishment. His sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. While Randy's capture brought relief and a sense of closure to the terrorized region, it left one troubling question unanswered. Did he have an accomplice? Several details suggested Randy might not have acted alone. Forensic evidence in 2 cases revealed an additional set of fingerprints and DNA that didn't match Randy. It seemed improbable that Randy could have moved bodies weighing up to 200 pounds by himself. It was also suspicious that he kept corpses in his vehicle for extended periods without anyone noticing. Furthermore, the photographs Randy had taken of his murdered victims had to be developed somewhere over the years. Yet no photo lab ever reported these disturbing images to authorities. Initially, investigators thought Randy might have developed them himself, but he lacked both a darkroom and the technical knowledge required. Suspicion fell on Jeff Graves, Randy's former partner, but he died before police could interrogate him, leaving this mystery unresolved. However, years later, a potential breakthrough emerged when Bob Jackson claimed to have answers. After Dennis McDougal published his book Angel of Darkness about the California Strangler in 1991, Jackson contacted him, confessing to killing 2 hitchhikers with Randy, one in Wyoming in 1975 and another in Colorado in 1976. However, authorities in both states stated they couldn't verify these claims. Jackson insisted he possessed more knowledge about Randy's crimes, claiming Randy's list only included the most memorable murders and that the actual victim count was closer to 100. McDougal reported this information to police and provided interview recordings. Detectives questioned Jackson extensively, but didn't believe his story. No murder charges were filed against him, and he was eventually convinced to admit himself to a psychiatric hospital. Jackson gained brief notoriety when his claims were published in a Beach magazine article in January 2000. Meanwhile, Randy sued McDougal and the publisher of Angel of Darkness, claiming the book damaged his reputation, portrayed him as mentally ill, and ruined his future employment prospects. He demanded $62 million in damages. The lawsuit was dismissed as frivolous in June 1994, ending the legal fabrications of the California Strangler. Randy Kraft remains incarcerated to this day. Despite most of the bodies being recovered, 22 victims remain unlocated. The California Strangler has shown absolutely no interest in helping investigators locate these missing victims or expressing any remorse for his actions. His sadistic crimes remain as shocking today as they were decades ago, matched only by his ability to evade capture for an entire decade while instilling terror and leaving a trail of blood across California. This concludes today's exploration into one of the darkest chapters in California's criminal history. The truth behind these cases continues to be more disturbing than any fiction we could imagine. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the most disturbing criminal cases in history. Until next time, stay vigilant.